Welcome back to Love Daniella, episode 13. This episode is going to be a little deeper. We're talking about depression and mental health. So if you are not in the space to hear about that, disclaimer, that is what this episode is going to be about. My personal experiences with depression and the things that I have gone through. So if you are not in the mental space to hear that right now, just know that this is what this episode is about. So you can always come back when you're in a better mental space. But I just wanted to give that disclaimer before we start the episode. Also, if the lighting is changing and you're watching, it is gloomy, but the sun's coming out. I don't know. I'm confused. The weather has been making me feel very somber, and I thought it was the perfect time to talk about my depression. And I got a comment on one of my videos kind of asking how I've gotten to this place in life, because I feel like I am the happiest I have ever been, and 16-year-old Daniella would be in shock by the way that I feel and how happy I genuinely feel. And if this episode can help anyone struggling with depression, that would mean the world to me. I have dealt with mental health since the beginning of time. I had anxiety growing up. Depression didn't really hit for me until I was about 13. But I had really bad clinical depression for 5 years, from the ages of like 13, 14 till about 19. And yeah, it's been a major part of my life. I have more of depressive episodes now. I don't really have full-blown depression. That was 5 years where I couldn't get myself out of it. So it's definitely a lot better, and I feel like I've come up with tools to help myself and things that I know will work. So if these tools can help someone else, of course, I would love to share them with you guys. First, we're going to start off with our highs and our lows. My high for this week is going to the Post Malone concert. I went with my boyfriend and my friend Riley and her boyfriend. It was a cute little double date. So that was my high. And my low is this time change. The sun is going down at 5 p.m. I cannot deal. I don't know how to do that, and it has been a lot. And I know this is like the time period where it just feels really weird, because you feel like the sun going down at 5 p.m. It's 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. So it's just adjustment period. So that's my low, is I feel very thrown off, and this is when seasonal depression hits. It's when that time change happens. Seasonal depression hits for me. So yeah, this is my story with my personal depression. No one truly knew when I had depression that I was going through it. I always kept my mental health to myself, and I think at that point in time, mental health wasn't really spoken about, and I literally would research depression and try to figure out what I was feeling, because I felt crazy and I didn't know anyone else that dealt with those struggles, and I felt crazy. And I think it's easy to feel crazy when you're going through something like that. And if no one's told you that, I'm proud of you for even getting out of bed in the morning. I'm proud of you for leaving the house. I know that it is hard when you're going through depression, and it's not an easy place to be in. So I applaud you for doing the best that you can. And if the best that you can right now is even below the bare minimum, I'm proud of you. This episode's going to be really hard for me not to cry, because talking about depression is heavy, and it makes me feel sad to think about anyone feeling the feelings that I felt back in the day. And so it is super sad to me, and I'm thankful that I could get myself out of it. But I know the feeling of feeling like you think that you'll feel like this forever. So let me be the example that I had really awful depression for 5 years of my life. Really thought I was going to feel like it forever, and I feel happy, and I have sad times. I am not a robot, but I love my life, and I never thought I would be able to say that. So just know it gets better. This is going to be really hard for me, because when I cry, I cannot speak. So we're going to try our best not to cry. But just if you hear a little crackling, it is my voice, and I'm trying my best. But I know this is a hard thing to talk about, and I just want depression to be more normalized, and people that maybe have someone in their life that has depression to have a better understanding, because I feel like I can look at it from almost an outside view now that I feel a lot better. So I just want this to help anyone and everyone. I'm literally sweating. When I get nervous, I sweat. So I've dealt with clinical depression and seasonal depression. Clinical depression more so when I was younger. I truly did not stop crying for 5 years straight. And obviously it was only in the comfort of my alone time. I really didn't open up to anyone. No one really knew I was depressed. I was always the happy-go-lucky person, but as soon as I was alone, I would cry. And it was just normal. Like it didn't feel like a normal night if I wasn't crying myself to sleep. And that became my norm for a really long time, where I just thought that's who I was, and I didn't think there was any overcoming it. I would get out of class, and I did like split periods. So I had two periods in high school and then 2 periods outside in this different like learning center. So from me getting out of school to driving there, I would cry. From there, driving to work, and it was always like I gave myself 5 minutes before to make sure my eyes weren't red and to fix my makeup before I got somewhere. I had like a routine down because when I was alone, I just wanted to cry. And it is so crazy to think about, because I think crying is a great release of anything you're feeling, but it almost just became so a part of my routine, which just made me more and more sad. It's just a very lonely place, and it's almost like you feel a sense of guilt. You don't want to feel like a burden to other people in your life. So that was the main reason I never shared. I never wanted people to worry about me. I never wanted to feel like people had to check on me. And in turn, I think that made my depression last a lot longer, because it was like my dirty little secret, and I didn't know how to help myself, so I didn't want to open up to someone else. I do that in many places in my life, where I will go through something, I overcome it, I feel better about it, and then I can open up to other people, but I can't open up while I'm going through that. I don't know why. That is just how I've always dealt with sadness and trauma. I don't like opening up when I'm in a vulnerable state of like crying. I just hate crying in front of people, even though I cried in front of you guys. But that's always been my thing, which I think in turn prolonged my depression. So if you can talk to someone you trust, or even go to therapy if you feel like there's no one in your life you really want to open up to, I would try therapy. This would be a great time to put in a sponsor like BetterHelp or something, but I don't have sponsors yet. But there are great websites that you can go on that I think don't take insurance if like that's something that you want to do. I just think that having someone to be a sounding board sometimes is really helpful of making you feel a little less crazy. So I really think talking to someone is the biggest thing. I will leave websites down below, like hotlines, all of that, because there are resources for people struggling, and you don't have to feel alone. So I will leave all that stuff down below. I also want to talk about depression in a sense for someone that hasn't dealt with depression. If you're watching this because you have a loved one that deals with depression and you don't know how to help them and you don't really know how it feels, I had a really hard time explaining to my mom how I felt, because she's always dealt with anxiety her whole life, but she had never dealt with depression, so she didn't know how to help me. And I finally opened up to her after I think about 4 years, and yeah, it was very interesting, and trying to explain that to someone when you're feeling it is really hard. So I'm going to explain my depression in the best of my abilities. Obviously, everyone's mental health looks different, but this is my best explanation of what depression is. Depressed people can be looked at as lazy because their room's a mess. Maybe they don't eat, and if they do eat, they leave their plate out and there's ants on it, and they can't wake up in the morning and all of that. But it feels like you are grieving, like you just lost the most important person in your life, and you don't know why you feel this way, because there's no reason to feel this way. It literally feels like someone died, and that is the feeling. If you've ever dealt with grief, it's that feeling, but it never goes away, and it feels like you have a pit in your stomach, like your heart is sunk to the bottom of your stomach. Doing simple tasks feels like you're walking through quicksand and you're just drudging through everything. It is hard to wake up in the morning because for a lot of people that have depression, they don't want to wake up in the morning, and sleeping is the only time they're not crying and they're not thinking. So waking up is almost an impossible task. It is sometimes really hard to eat and feed yourself. I never got hungry when I was depressed. It was hard to shower. It's hard to do basic needs and things that you think everyone can take a shower and feed themselves and go to bed on time. But people with depression, their brain isn't working in that. It's like you're working in fight or flight 24/7, and simple tasks are impossible. So if you know someone with depression and you're trying to help, cook for them, bring them lunch, help them clean their room, these little things that you think, oh my gosh, they're living in filth or whatever, sometimes just being there to be helpful, because it seems like a simple task to you, but it's not to someone that is dealing with depression. I think that's very important. I think a lot of the time people with depression have a lot of shame around feeling this way, because a lot of the time if you're sad or you're grieving, you have a reason. You're grieving someone you lost, and that can be your excuse of why you're feeling this way or why you're not getting things done. It's like, well, I'm grieving a loss of a loved one. But when you have depression, you really don't have any reason as to why you're feeling this way. So a lot of shame surrounds it. So I didn't like when people would text me and say, how are you feeling? I know you've been down lately, because it felt like a call out, like, oh, people notice, or I'm a burden. So being there, even just check-ins of like thinking of you, I love you so much, because feeling like you're not alone, because I know people with depression, as much as people are around you, you're like, people don't love me as much as, I love them. And you kind of just start painting a picture in your head. So doing check-ins of just like, I love you text, or thinking of you text, or this made me think of you, goes a long way. I had a few friends in high school that kind of knew what I was going through, but like I didn't ever fully let people in. And they would just text me and say, I'm coming over tonight and we're going to rot on your couch. And just having someone to be there with me, or I'm coming and I'm picking you up and we're going to go on a drive, or we're going to go pick up food. Because if I had the choice and they said, do you want to do this? I would just be like, sorry, I'm busy. But sometimes it was nice feeling like I was forced to do something, because if not, I wouldn't leave the house. So just doing thoughtful things for that person is very important, and just make sure they know that you love them and that they're not crazy. Also, this is a very hard episode for me to talk about, because it like goes back to a time that I don't truly remember. My personal trauma response is blacking out memories. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I don't remember pretty much anything in high school, because that's when my mental health was the worst. So I have to dig really deep to find these memories and think about these things, because I just don't remember a lot. But it's PC, and I can kind of remember what people did for me, what I feel like helped, what I felt like didn't, but it is very PC for me. Now I want to go over tips. I have a whole list here of tips that I have created for things that have helped me. And I know when you are feeling depressed and when you feel like you're always going to feel like this, when people say, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? It feels like you want to rip out your hair. I get that. And I completely understand, because I was the same way. If anyone gave me a tip or trick to solving this, I would think that they were crazy, that they didn't understand that this was a chemical imbalance in my brain and no one got it. So I get it, but try to do these things, try to implement these things. Start with 1, start with 2, and eventually you can build up these routines, and hopefully it helps. I feel like when I hit my breaking point, I didn't want to feel like the way I felt anymore. I was like, this is 4 years of feeling this way, 4 years of crying myself to sleep every night. And I tried everything. And these were the biggest things that actually helped. I never was on medication. I kind of grew up in a household where medication wasn't really a thing. I barely took Advil, so medication didn't feel like a good option for me. And I know sometimes that is the only option for people, but try these things and maybe these things will help before you need to go down that route of medication, because I think medication, this is just my opinion, obviously everyone has their own, but I think a lot of the time medication can cause other issues. So I try to go the natural way before medication. So these are my tips. My first one is to find a routine. Routine is so important when you're dealing with depression because simple tasks are impossible. Brushing your teeth, taking a shower, eating breakfast, all of those things feel absolutely impossible. So finding a routine that you can implement, whether that's waking up at the same time every day, even if it's a later time, even if it's 11 a.m., wake up at that time every day and create a sense of routine. Once you have that down, make yourself the same breakfast every day. Less thought. I think a lot of the time thinking is really hard. And as soon as I overthink it, it's like, okay, I'm not going to eat. So find a breakfast that you like and eat that same breakfast every day. It's easier doing these things and having less time to think. You're kind of in overdrive of this is what I'm doing. I think that's very great. So building habits is my first thing. My next thing is knowledge. We have a lot more knowledge on mental health now. Back in the day, I had Google, so I don't feel like many people talked about it on YouTube, TikTok. That wasn't a thing. So I Googled everything. I looked up what seasonal depression looks like, what depression looks like. I learned a lot. I literally did one of my presentations in high school about depression. I'm like, I'm really calling myself out, but I didn't think about it because it was the only thing I was interested in. So I think learning about it is very powerful. Learning what other people feel, learning how other people have overcome it, learning tips and tricks. I think just learning about whatever mental illness you have is a powerful tool. So I didn't realize it was helping, but it made me feel less alone. It made me feel less crazy learning about it. So I learned about every type of depression there was. And it was the only thing I really cared about. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about homework. I researched depression. So that was my thing. I think knowledge is very powerful. So that is my second. Third is moving your body. I know it feels impossible to get out of the house. I know it feels impossible to get out of bed. But if that's you setting a timer for 15 minutes and putting a workout on your TV, or going down and taking a walk, or going to a class, like a workout class, moving your body has science to back it. Working out has science to back it. It increases your dopamine. I always get mixed up with dopamine and serotonin, but it raises your happy hormones and there's science to back it. So I know it feels like that's not going to make you happy, but try a small amount each day. It doesn't have to be for long, but implement that. The next one is connection. Connection is very important when you are depressed and it feels hard to put yourself out there and to hang out with friends because you'd rather be alone and crying by yourself and really not having to put on a show, because that's how it always felt. It felt like going and hanging out with people made other people happy. It didn't really make me happy, so I felt like I was putting on a show and pretending to be someone that I wasn't. A happy person, which I didn't feel. So I know it's hard, but try to at least see people like once a week. Try to go places and do things outside of your comfort zone. Just get out there and try your best to be present. I know being present is kind of like the last thing you're thinking about when you are depressed, but being present with the people around you and thinking about what you're doing instead of how you're feeling. I would try to do that where I'm like, I'm bowling, like this is fun. Like I would kind of talk myself through it because immediately I want to do negative self-talk and say, this sucks, I hate feeling like this, and all of that. So that is my biggest tip. The next one kind of ties in is focus on the good. If you can only point out one thing a day that is good, whether it's the sunset of like clocking in your head, that's a beautiful sunset, or that's a gorgeous butterfly, or I love this meal. Really tell yourself that. Speak it out. Put that on a loop all day of, wow, that sunset last night was so pretty, or whatever you can think about. Try to point out the things that may bring you joy, may bring you some sense of a positive outlook. So try very simple with one and eventually build it up with pointing out more and more happy things and focus on those. And when you feel yourself in your head, when you're out and about thinking of every negative thing that's happening, try to every other negative thought, try to put a positive one in between it, because your brain is so powerful, and if you're only thinking of the negative, it overflows with negative, and it is really hard to get yourself out of that. Another thing is sunlight. Sunlight is a big thing for me. Go sit out on your balcony, go outside. Sunlight is so good for your mental health. If you can, sunrise or sunset, looking directly at the sun is really good for your mental health. Having it penetrate through your eyes goes straight to your brain, and it helps with your dopamine and serotonin. So sunlight, if you can, sunlight. If you live somewhere that it's sunny, try a few minutes every day, and that was very helpful for me. Another thing is eating 3 meals a day. Again, I know it feels impossible to make yourself food, so if that's just making yourself something frozen or ordering out or something like that, try to eat 3 times a day. It can be simple. You can get yogurts and granola for the morning, and in the afternoon get little bagged salads in the afternoon. Like, you can make it simplified for yourself. Obviously, try to make healthier choices, because we have a lot of junk in our food this day and age, and a lot of chemicals, and those chemicals affect mental health, and those chemicals affect your brain. So if you can make healthier choices and simplify it, and if dishes are too hard to do, buy paper plates, because I know things are a lot harder. Another thing that was really hard for me to understand is I had to stop listening to sad music, because I fed into my depression. I fed into it. I listened to sad, depressing ass songs every single night, and I would fall asleep crying my eyes out because I listened to these really sad songs. And I know it feels weird listening to uplifting songs when you feel sad. It almost makes you feel worse at first, because, you know, you're in your head, and I feel like a sad, somber song just goes better with the mood. But I kind of had to force myself to stop listening to sad music, because I knew it was not helping my mental health. And I do not like rap by any means, or like these like crazy uplifting songs, but I switched it to more like groovy alternative music, because it still had a little bit softer of a tone, but it wasn't like the singer-songwriter rip out your heart type of music. It was like the groovy music that you can roll your windows down to and go on a sunset drive, you know, like that type of music. So think about that. If you really listen to sad songs, I know how much it's sad, because I love a singer-songwriter. I love depressing music, but it's a time and a place. I do not let myself listen to that every day. I listen to that music if I really want to feel my feelings one day, but I do not let myself listen to that music often. Next is getting ready, especially if you work from home or you don't get out much on the weekends, anything like that. Getting ready, taking a shower. If you want to do your makeup, do your makeup. I did my makeup every single day just to feel like a person, because sometimes you just feel blah. You don't feel like a person. You don't feel pretty. So taking a shower, putting on something other than your PJs, even if it's a fresh set of PJs, getting out of what you slept in and putting on a more elevated PJ, doing things like that to make you feel that way. I know a lot of people during quarantine slept in the same thing that they wore all day. They were working from home, and a lot of people fell into a depression during quarantine. But every day I got ready, I put on an outfit that I liked, and it made me feel more normal. So getting ready kind of does something with your brain of making you feel more productive. So I would try that, even if it's just washing your face and putting chapstick on. And the last tip I have is journaling how you feel. Journal your feelings and what you're feeling every day, where your brain is going to, because that becomes knowledge of being able to look back where your thought patterns are and working on those things, because a lot of the time your brain feels clouded, and so when you're thinking about what can I work on, it feels so daunting to figure out where to start. But if you're journaling how you feel every day and you look back on that in a few weeks, then you can kind of see where your thoughts are going and try to work on it piece by piece. I think it's also really great to get the thoughts in your brain out and on a piece of paper, because it feels like you can open up about more than you can if you're talking to someone. So writing everything you feel down and getting that off your chest, and just journal your feelings and not have that weight of everything you're feeling. It's nice to sometimes just take it and place it somewhere. So journaling was very helpful for me. I think journaling for anyone is very helpful. So I would definitely try to do that often if you can. And truly, if you feel like you need it, therapy is such a great resource, and having someone to be that sounding board is such a great resource. I have so many friends that go to therapy and absolutely love it. So don't feel like going to therapy is weak, because I know a lot of people have that opinion, but I think everyone could use therapy. So you saying you want to go to therapy is not weak. It is powerful that you want to take control of your emotions. So therapy. The last thing that's kind of a tip, but it is something I just want to make you guys aware of, is don't cry in places that you have to go to every day. So if that's your car, if you drive every single day, do not cry in your car. Try your best. You sleep in your bed every day. Do not cry in bed. You want to sit on your couch and that's your relaxation place. Do not cry on your couch. My biggest thing that I started doing when I moved and I was getting my depression together, I would sit against my bed. I would put a pillow on the floor and I would lean against my bed, kind of like I'm doing with this couch. I'm sitting on the floor right now. I made that my spot, because it wasn't a spot I never wanted to sit on my ground in my room on like tile. It wasn't a place I went to often. So I made that my safe space for crying, because my places that I cried were things that I did every day. It was the shower, it was the bed, it was the car. And so it just made it easy, because your brain kind of creates that habit of this is where I cry. So your body immediately goes to that place. So I would try to build that spot. Sometimes I slept on the ground and it felt stupid. And I was like, why am I doing this? But my safe space for sleep and getting a good night's rest was my bed. It became my bed. And that used to be the spot that I cried. So every time I sunk into the sheets, I would start sobbing. So make your crying spot somewhere different from the places that you want to get rest or you want to be able to relax. That was honestly one of the biggest things, and it feels so stupid, but it is true. Like, if that is your spot and you cry yourself to sleep every night, you're going to get your crying out on the ground, and then once you're done and you feel like you released everything, get into bed, and that is the spot that you relax. And that is the biggest thing for me. I still do that to this day. If I am in a really bad spot and I just want to cry, I go to like the side of my bed and I lean up against my bed and I just sit there, and that's where I'll feel my feelings. And it's very odd, and I've never heard anyone else talking about this, but it helped me so much. So I just wanted to give that tip. Try it, see if it works for you. It worked wonders for me. But I think we're just going to end this here. I hope that if you're dealing with anything mental health related, that you feel better and just know that you are loved and you are here for a reason, and you're not going to feel like this forever. And I love you. I hope that you have a great Tuesday. Sorry, this was a little deeper, but next week maybe we'll do a little bit lighter of a topic. But I hope you guys have a great day. Everything is linked down below. I have an advice column too, so if you want to ask specific questions, I will answer those, and my DMs are always open. I love you guys, and I will see you next Tuesday.